Hi, it's David Walshe, Secret Sandland. I'm just making a short video about Southport'S mysterious River Nile. Where we're stood here, you can see Morrison's behind me, and the sun's setting in the distance over there behind what a house called Nile Bank. And the reason I'm stood here is where we're stood would be in the 19th century the mouth of the River Nile, which is shown on multiple maps. Lee's map of 1824. It's also shown on Greenwood's map of, Hennett's map of 1828, Walker's plan of 1834, and of course the first edition Ordnance Survey map. And where we are here outside number 4 Duke Street, this would have been the mouth of the Nile in the early to mid 19th century. The historian Frank Cheetham estimates that the width of the mouth of the Nile would have been about 80 yards. So we're gonna have a little walk. So those of you who've been on my Southport'S and early Southport walk will be familiar with some of the things that I'm gonna show you here today. But of course, the River Nile, there's a lot of mystery surrounding it as to how big it actually was. By using some of the scales on the 1824 and 1834 maps, I estimate it to be about 5.5 to 6 metres wide at its banks. Probably navigable at high tide, as is shown on a painting which is held in the Lancashire Archives. And there was a series of footbridges and bridges over the Nile as well. And the first bridges would have been down here. This of course, this is a road called Beach Priory Gardens today. This originally led to one of the early marine residences of an area called Nile Square. The house was originally called Beach Grove, and there was as you see, the road dips down. One of the bridges would have spanned the Nile here. There was also a small tributary off the Nile, which would have gone to some of the houses in Nile Square. So there were 2 bridges here, as shown on the 1834 map. William Ashton, who wrote his book in 1920, he describes, he retells a story of coal being landed for the residents of Nile Square, which is essentially Lord Street West today, and it was brought via Wigan, from Wigan via the River Douglas, and it was brought here for the residents of Nile Square. I'm just going to show you another little point here. Of course, we're walking down Duke Street. You see the roundabout behind me is the site where Sutton's Hotel would have stood, and I'm going to show you where the Nile flowed in this part of Southport, which of course was originally called Southport'S. Now, here's a couple of gateposts here to give you a bit of a clue. This gatepost here, Brook Lawn, and of course calling it a river is a bit sort of fanciful. It was more of a brook really, which of course a lot of the water courses in this area were known as, and it flowed through numbers 5 and 7 of Lord Street West here. This follows the course, and then it went through the grounds of the West End, what is now the West End Congregational Church, which was opened in 1862. Of course, in the 1860s, this whole area changed. A lot of development happened. Houses were built. You can see the grounds of the church here, slightly falling away, and of course in the grounds of the willows too. So the Nile came through here, and it's at this point in the church grounds where the only stone bridge spans the Nile. Now, it's shown on paintings, various paintings, to have had an archway, but there's 2 accounts of people who were around at that time, James Whitehead and another unnamed annotator who was clearly a child in the 19th century. They specifically stated that there was no arch bridge over the Nile. It was just merely a flat. It was stones placed over that were flat. We're now going to walk round to St Paul's Square, and I'll show you more points of the River Nile. Okay, so we're now in St Paul's Square. Behind me was where some properties called Nile Bank Cottages stood, just here on the edge. Of course, this would have been known as Upper King Street back then. And just a little pointer I forgot to mention, a chap called Richard Ayton, in 1814, he came along the coast. He did a tour of Britain along the coast, and he came from Formby to Southport. And when he arrived at the Nile, he said that he just hopped over it. So it's probably at that point was probably at low tide. So where we are now, so the Nile would have come through the ground of the church, and then roughly about in this area here, there would have been another little footbridge, just about where I'm stood now, and then the Nile continued to flow down this road here. Of course, this road today is called this road is actually called St Paul's Square, but when it was first built in the 1860s, it was actually called Nile Street. Obviously, after the River Nile, and there's a couple of other buildings in this area which also have the name Nile in it. So it came along here in roughly a bit of a straight line, and of course just over there on the corner of what is now Princess Street and Duke Street, the former site of Trinity Hall boarding school for girls. Prior to that being built, that was where Thomas Methody, which was his nickname, Thomas Ball's boat building yard was. And of course, the proximity of the Nile to the boat building yard can't be ignored. It was just, so the boat building yard was on the corner of Princess Street and Duke Street. So it would have flowed through here, and then where these houses are, and there's one of my followers up there, Mr. Bailey, would have flowed through where these houses are, and it's not by chance that this road actually curves around, because of course St Paul's Church would have been built on this, where these flats are, opened in 1864. It came through here, and there was another footbridge here. This cobbled alleyways are the remains of a track which led to an old street called Park Street, and where these three properties are here is the site of the Strawberry Cottages. But as I said, the Nile flowed round here and continued along Talbot Street, which is where I'm going to walk to now. So just outside number 64 Talbot Street, which was actually originally called Nile Bank. So 64 and 66 would be the site of some of the old properties of Southport'S, and as I said, the River Nile flowed roughly through the back gardens of where these properties are. Talbot Street probably dates to the early to mid 1860s. So it flowed through where the houses are here, and then as we approach the Birkdale boundary, which is a very important part of the story of the Nile, as it approached the Birkdale boundary, it then was joined by another watercourse called the Hollybrook, which of course we've got Hollybrook Road. Now the Hollybrook was said to rise in the sandhills, which would roughly be in between Trafalgar Road and Waterloo Road today. It was just walking down Talbot Street, crossing into Belmont Street. Now there was an account of the historian Cheetham. He did an inquiry in the 1930s about the River Nile, and he spoke to a chap who was a child in the 1860s, and he said that the River Nile was used to flow down his through at the end of his garden on Belmont Street, which of course is true. So when the Nile met the boundary here, it went in a straight line, which of course formed the boundary between Southport and Birkdale. Okay, so we're just crossing and we're into Hollybrook Road here. But the Hollybrook actually went through the front gardens of these properties. Yeah, it flowed. The Hollybrook came through these front gardens. Now, I said there was some more clues in the area. Here's some more gateposts here. This one's called Brook Lodge. Brook Lodge, and then I think there's another one. There's definitely one on the Alton Road. It's got this brook in the name. So it was from this point really what some people refer to as the Upper Nile. Of course, it was basically the boundary ditch, the boundary brook, which is the proper name for it. The Upper Nile's a bit of a erroneous title really, because the Nile really only extended to this area where it met the Hollybrook, and then going along the boundary, that was of course of artificial origin. It's man-made. The historian Cheetham believes that the boundary originally extended to the shore, and at some point the lower part, which of course where we were earlier, filled up with sand, and water eventually diverted in the direction of the shore, as is shown on the maps. Some other little snippets. In 1855, which of course 1 year after Southport'S Hotel was demolished in 1854, the Nile was turned down the village, as the newspaper reported it, turned down the village, and it was used to flush the sewers, and it actually emptied itself onto the shore via Neville Street. It's just there's some random snippets now. For a guy called Thomas Jackson, farmer. He was multi-talented. He had multiple occupations. Thomas Jackson of Southport'S. He was known to wash his carrots in the pure waters of the Nile. So as I said, it was the naming of the Nile. There's some controversy over that as well. So. And I must also point out that the River Nile wasn't actually mentioned in any guidebooks until 1849. It was, as I've said earlier, it was shown on maps, but it wasn't mentioned in any guidebooks until 1849, where it was referred to as a mere sandy streamlet that one could jump across, similar to the description of Richard Ayton. So quite contrasting, quite mysterious. But the naming, so Bland, of Bland's Annals, Edwin Bland, he was the first person to mention how it was named, and he stated it was named after Nelson's victory in 1898 at the opening party of Southport'S Hotel, which at first he said took place in the August, which of course, if you're opening a hotel, August would be for bathing, of course, which was primarily what it was used for. That would be a good date to open it in the August, of course, with big bathing and little bathing Sunday festivals taking place as well. But of course, Cheetham made the point that the news of Nelson's victory didn't actually reach England. Of course, didn't actually reach England until the October. So there was a bit of dubious about Bland's story as to how it was named, and he believed that Bland actually made the story up. As I said, it was only first published in 1887 in his first edition Annals. Another guy I'll mention is Edwin Beattie. I'm sure you've heard me mention him quite a numerous times, an artist. So he he believed that the Nile received its name from its sandy banks having some resemblance to its Egyptian prototype. So, I mean, as for today, it's culverted. I know there was an investigation carried out in recent years by, I'm not sure if it was Sefton Council, United Utilities. I think it's called the Nile investigation. If you go onto the beach at Weld Road in Birkdale, turn left and walk not too far, you'll come across some waters that are being discharged into the sea. It's thought that is some of the watercourses, i.e. Hollybrook, the Nile. I think there's another one as well. I'll have to check the name on that one. So yeah, was Cheetham correct in his assumption that it was that it was originally a complete man-made, and it was originally went from the whole length of the boundary to the shore, and then it was obviously later filled in by natural causes, blown sand? Or was it simply created by the residents of Nile Square, who of course moved in? Did they create it, or was it already there when Sarah Walmsley built Bellevue Cottage, and of course William Sutton? Some have suggested that, of course, the reason why she chose that spot being the beauty spot with the stream or brook running close by. Or was it actually created by the residents of Southport'S? Of course, as I said, you had Thomas Ball, the boat builder. They had multiple occupations. They were farmers. They could make any money any way they could. They would run bathing vans, and of course the boats would be used for taking visitors over to Lytham. So was it created by them? Who knows? Further investigation required. But I hope you've enjoyed that video showing you some points of the Nile. It's just a bit of to show some of you that may not be able to get on some of my walks, and to give you a bit of a flavour of what they're like. So please follow the page, follow the socials, and there'll be some more videos coming soon. Thank you.